Why are little kids so scary? Honestly, whenever they make an appearance in any horror movie, I honestly lose it. There's just something about someone who's meant to be so small and innocent being so creepy that it's just terrifying. And their voices are also so high-pitched, so that just makes it so much worse. But kids are definitely special, I will give them that. A lot of people believe they know and can sense and remember things that we cannot, and I believe that. I feel like kids are more in tune with themselves and have zero inhibitions. They feel and say exactly what they want to, and I feel like they can also see things that we can't, kind of like cats and dogs. But some kids just remember things that they shouldn't be able to remember, things that didn't even happen to them. What is up, you guys? Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host Ayman Hassan, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing some creepy kids with the top 10 kids who got visions from their past life. Starting us off at number 10 is Ryan. At the tender age of 4, Ryan started going around his house directing imaginary movies, shouting action, and so on. And at first his parents thought it was cute, but then it quickly became a nuisance when Ryan would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and saying he dreamt he was in Hollywood and his heart exploded. The doctor boiled it down to night terrors and his parents stayed patient with him. Then one night before bed, Ryan grabbed his mum and told her, "I think I used to be someone else." He remembered a big white house and a swimming pool. It was in Hollywood. He had 3 sons, but he couldn't remember their names. Ryan then started crying when he couldn't remember his sons' names. His mum then did some research into reincarnation in Hollywood and bought a bunch of books on it. One day when flipping through one of the books, Ryan pointed to a black and white picture from a 30s movie called Night After Night and pointed to a man in the photo and said, "That guy's me, I found me." The picture was then sent to a few film archivists before the man was identified as Martin, an extra in the film. Ryan's family flew to California to meet Martin's daughter, and everything he had said about her dad was 100% true. Martin was a Broadway dancer, agent, and more, and yes, he did have 3 sons and a daughter. Coming in at number 9 is Dorothy EADY. Born in January of 1904, Dorothy's family lived in the Blackheath area of London. When she was 3, Dorothy had a bad fall down the stairs and her pulse stopped. She was declared dead but miraculously came back to life an hour later, but this step into the afterlife left her different. Dorothy started having dreams and visions of a large columned building and kept saying she wanted to go home. When she was home, she was born in Blackheath and was still there. A year later, the family took her to the British Museum, and when she saw pictures of Egypt, she immediately said that was home. She felt like her visions were so real that in 1933 she moved to Egypt to be with her husband. They ended up getting divorced, but she stayed in Egypt working as a folklorist. It's believed in her previous life she was a woman called Bentraisht, an orphan who was adopted by the Temple of Komel Sultan. Dorothy claimed she didn't remember ordinary life, meaning most of her life was spent inside the temple. She also said she was King Seti's lover and that he got her pregnant, and instead of ruining his life and reveal that he's the father, she just committed suicide, which is not the best way out. At number 8 we have Shanti Devi. Born in India back in 1926, Shanti started going to school at the age of 4, and that's when certain flashbacks and visions started coming back to her. She started saying she was from Mathura and that you could find her husband over there. The 4-year-old girl apparently has a husband, okay. She also said she gave birth to a son, but that she ended up dying 10 days later. Shanti was so desperate to know whether these visions were real or not that she even tried to run away at the age of 6 to try and go to Mathura. The case was so well known that Mahatma Gandhi himself set up a commission just to investigate it. They found a merchant in Mathura whose name was Kedar Nath, and he told them that his wife Lugdi Devi had died 9 years ago, 10 days after giving birth to their son. Shanti knew a lot about Kedar and Lugdi's life together, and even Kedar was convinced that Shanti was Lugdi's real reincarnation. She knew about their life in that much detail. Can you imagine? So much detail that the husband was like, "Yes, this is my wife." Filling at number 7 slot is James Leininger. 2-year-old Louisiana kid James was always obsessed with his toy planes, but at one point he started having terrible nightmares of being in a plane crash. He'd scream while still asleep, saying things like, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out," and he would kick and thrash around in bed. Even during the day when he was awake, he would crash his toys into furniture around the house and yell, "Airplane crash on fire." When his parents finally confronted him, he said he had been a pilot and that he had flown off a boat. Apparently it was called Natoma, and so his dad said that sounds Japanese, to which James said no, it's American. James went further and said he piloted a Corsair plane and that his nickname had been Little Man. These aren't just visions, this is proper detailed recall. After doing more research, his dad found out that there was an American aircraft carrier called the USS Natoma Bay, and the mission had lost one pilot, James Huston. And the death was exactly like James had said, exploding, then crashing into the water and sinking. It's also very sus how they have the same first name. Just saying. Now number 6 is the elephant. This one's actually sad and comes from Redditor Hunair, whose younger brother would always talk about his past life. When he was about 4 or 5, he would tell them about his life in India, the street he lived on, what he did, and so on. Intricate details that he just couldn't have made up. He also told them that he died when an elephant crushed him and would cry for hours about how much blood there was. And every time he finished crying, his body would be freezing to the touch. And keep in mind, this 5-year-old had never even seen or been exposed to death or that much bleeding, so I mean, where did he think of that? Coming in at number 5 is Sam. So a couple thought their 2-year-old son Sam was a bit of a genius. By 18 months he had been speaking full sentences, so it's like, wow, are you the next Albert Einstein? No, he isn't. Sam started saying weird shit like, when I was your age, I changed your diaper, to his dad Ron. Ron just assumed he had misheard what Sam had said and just smiled and nodded, kinda like those penguins in Madagascar. But as the months went on, Sam continued to say weird things to the point Ron and Kathy started piecing it together bit by bit. They concluded that Sam may be Ron's late father. They asked him how he came back and he said, I just went whoosh and came out the portal. And which 2-year-old knows the word portal? Come on now. The next question was whether he had any siblings, and Sam said he had a sister who turned into a fish. Some bad guys turned her into a fish and she died. And it was true, Sam's granddad had a sister who was murdered and found floating in San Francisco Bay. Sam even knew how his own granddad had died, a cerebral hemorrhage. Imagine losing your dad, but not really, because your dad is now your son. At number 4 are the Pollock twins. I feel like this story has been shared many times on the channel, but only because it's so damn extraordinary. This story is strange because these English twins are actually the reincarnations of their 2 dead sisters. Jacqueline was 6 years old and Joanna was 11 when they tragically died in a car crash. But fast forward a year, their parents had a pair of twins called Jillian and Jennifer. Why did all their names start with a J? It's like the Kardashians. Anywho, Jennifer had a white scar on her head, which Jacqueline had had as well, which she had gotten after a bicycle accident. When the twins were both young, the family moved town for 4 years, and when they came back to their hometown, they were able to recognize a majority of the town. And this would have been fine, you know, maybe the kids had crazy good memory, but the twins had never even been to these places before. They thought Jacqueline and Joanna's school was their own, and they could name all their sisters as toys as well. After the age of 5, they forgot all those memories, but people coined them as complete proof of reincarnation. Filling at number 3 slot is the Marine. I feel like war veterans get reincarnated a lot, or is it just me? There were so many stories I read of kids remembering themselves fighting in one war or another, so it's like, is there a correlation here? Like this story, for example, shared by Redditor Rutherford23. She shared that her oldest son was named after a Marine who was on her husband's last deployment. Apparently he had died on that deployment, but her son had no idea about any of that. One day, as they were all driving to the user's sister's house, they happened to pass the military base where the veteran's namesake was buried. When her son saw it, he said, I'm buried over there. The parents were like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? And their 3-year-old son says, I'm buried over there in the ground, you know, from when I died when I was fighting bad guys with daddy, before I was your kid. Mind you, they had never driven to this side of the city before or even spoken about the Marine he was named after. Now at number 2 is China. This comes from Redditor Hi Dingo Do, who said they remember when they had just learned to speak in full sentences and would walk around the house with this huge cloth bag. Anytime his mum asked him what the bag was for, he would say for delivering messages, like I did in China, despite not having any relation to China or even being Chinese. This sort of thing became a recurring thing in the house, and the user would mention intricate details about his life in China and that his English name had been Bob. Alright Bob, carry on. And finally, at number 1 is the burning. This was just plain ominous, and I would be scared of my daughter if she said this to me. I'd be like, orphanage for you. No, I'm kidding. That was savage. Shared by BuzzFeed user Very Angry Goose, she said that when her daughter was nearly 4, she was playing with her toys on the floor one day, and then she turned to her and said, Mama, I need to tell you something. So obviously the user was all ears like any parent is when their infant child wants to share something with them. Her daughter then goes, before I was me and before you were my mama, I burned. And the user was like, what do you mean? Why would a 4-year-old even know what being burnt meant? She continued and said, my old mama tried to get me out, but the door was stuck. My skin looked weird. Can you imagine that? Your kid remembering they burned alive in their past life and that their mum couldn't save them. Scarring. Traumatic. More tragic adjectives. And that is it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Have you ever had any visions or just flashbacks of your past life? I never have, to be honest. Clearly my past life wasn't that interesting. Not very memorable. Anyway, I've been your host for this one, Aben Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!